You're listening to Neocash Radio. With you in the studio today, it's Darren. We have JJ joining us remotely via Skype. We've got a great show lined up for you today. There's been so much that happened while we were gone. First, let me ask JJ how's he doing. How you doing, JJ?
Doing great, Darren.
All right. Great. Perfect. So, well, there's just to give you a rundown of some things that happened. There's stocks closed at a high this week. That's the Dow Jones, and the S&P is pretty high too. So stocks in general are high. Open Bazaar was released today. That's Sunday the 31st. It's released. So we talked about it a few weeks ago, and so now it's actually out in the wild. And then Andreas is switching roles at blockchain.info. So he was the chief security officer. He's now will be joining the board of blockchain.info. Great guys over in blockchain.info. And also, you can check out a blog entry that I put up about attending the Ethereum meetup. And so that's been generating a little bit of buzz just around the Ethereum community. It was a great meetup there in Boston. With James organized it, so many great people. And Coin Authenticator, we could probably talk a lot more about it, but we won't talk about it right now. But Coin Authenticator has been it's been announced that it exists, and what it is basically the next generation Bitcoin wallet. It'll have one name integration, so that way you can type Darren Tapp, and that's my name, my last name, and you can send, and my Bitcoin address will just show up. Darren Tapp with no spaces. I have two P's in Tap. So if you want to send me Bitcoins with one name, feel free. I just set that up because of this new wallet getting started. And we'll probably have a report to you on one name in future shows. So, JJ,
Yes, sir.
what have you been reading about this last week?
Well, there's some very interesting things going on with the trading platform BTCE, and actually today this happened. It appears that a trading bot has malfunctioned, and someone had set their bot to do something and forgot about it, or they're not paying attention, because it is trading at an incredible volume. Normally, BTCE will trade around 3,000 Bitcoin per day of volume, and already the volume for today or for Sunday is over 28,000. So,
Wow.
for whatever reason, now the price has obviously come down. We'll talk more about that, I guess, towards the end of the show. But so it's not like this bot is really doing anything underhanded, because it's already been spotted. People are already seeing what's going on.
I don't know how you
This
would
is
make that much trades without basically giving money away itself. I don't know. So,
right, and that's one big thing. There's a story about it on CryptoCoinNews.com, and basically the story points out that the big winner in this whole fiasco is BTCE, because they're going to collect a small commission fee on each trade. So they're going to have a big day of commissions, because this bot just continues to trade with either itself or with other bots on the exchange. So it's one of those situations where the users and other people involved, they're really not at risk personally, because if they decide to sell their Bitcoin or buy Bitcoin, that's their decision based on their own determinations. But this bot is probably just trading with itself, or other similar bots, um, and so it's not really a situation where someone is going to get hurt, other than the person running this bot, who has kind of not followed through and paid attention to what their bot is doing. So some interesting news from BTCE, um, probably the third largest exchange, and one of the oldest exchange that is still running.
oh yeah,
So
they're they were around before Mount Gox or around when Mount Gox was starting. So yes, certainly one of the oldest exchanges.
Yeah, so that's some of the interesting news I've been seeing today, and but we also have some. I mean, BTCE is a, I believe, a Russian-based trading
Yeah,
platform.
it's either that or Bulgarian,
Yeah, it's one of those
Eastern Bloc countries.
yeah, Eastern Bloc countries. But we also have more international news coming out of Argentina, isn't that right?
That's right. In Argentina, there's all kinds of crazy stuff happening. So what is happening in Argentina is printing money. So our listeners, if you've been listening to the show, you probably know that Argentina has had basically a default on some loans. They have like some bonds that they have, and they have really kind of said that the U.S. courts that said they have to pay back their own bonds. The Argentina said that the U.S. courts were kind of bad to make that decision, which is kind of weird since they agree to pay it back anyway. So, but what they're going to do to try to rectify this situation, and this isn't too far off the mark for Argentina, they're going to print up 100 billion pesos and basically have those to pay off the bonds, and that's about the equivalent of $12 billion, maybe a little bit less than $12 billion, and that's a lot for Argentina. So you're going to see this go into effect November and December of this year, and that's three times the amount of the quantitative easing or the extra money added to the economy that what they did last year for November and December. So this is going to be pretty significant. We've seen the peso fall from like 5 pesos per dollar to 8 per dollar in the period of a year. So next year may even be a more significant fall in value. So um, just
More
more,
bad news out of Argentina.
yeah, more bad news about Argentina. So, but
We Go ahead, Darren.
uh, do you have anything to add about Argentina, JJ?
Well, I mean, we have covered a lot of stuff going on in Argentina. It's certainly been, if anyone's been listening to the show, we've been keeping track of the situation there, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better from what we've been reporting on for the last few months. In fact, I think since the beginning of the show, we've been talking about what's going on there, and I think it's an example. Argentina is an unfortunate example, a tragic example of just how some of these decisions and centralized controls can really get out of hand. And I'm really hoping that the people in Argentina are finding some way of having a stable store of value other than the peso, because the peso is certainly going to be taking a hit. So it's a
Yeah.
bad time in Argentina again.
Yeah, and there seems to be no stop for it, as you said, next year and everything, because there are some economists that say when this type of stuff happens, it takes about 6 months before the true effects or the full effect is felt throughout the economy. Because
Yeah,
basically,
that might be true, but we're in the sort of digital age where everything happens faster. And the I think the way money is transferred, the way everything is sort of more instant, might have a faster effect with the effects of this inflation. So,
yeah, you're right, JJ. My sources are at least 50 years old, so you might be right on that. So,
well, our friend Charlie was in the news as well, Darren. I don't know
yeah,
if you want to.
well, yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about this because on one hand, it seems like it's not that big a deal. It's one guy that we're going to talk about, Charlie Shrem, who was the CEO of MidInstant when they were around as a company, and he took a plea deal this week. And first thing you might think of, that's not that newsworthy because it's just one guy having taking a plea deal, and that happens all the time. But something bothered me about the circumstances of this. JJ, did you remember the case? Or
Yeah, they pretty much wanted to get him for money laundering, wasn't that right?
yeah, they accused him of basically working with somebody else to help money end up in a illegal drug market, and I mean that's what the accusations were. And this, I believe, when did they first charge Charlie? JJ, was it a year ago?
Yeah, it was basically we had started the show, and I want to say it was just about a year ago.
Yeah, so just about a year ago. And um, so, well, at least when I went through school, they taught me this idea that you're innocent until proven guilty. So he was charged with a crime, and then due process, fair trial, and all that. He's given a trial, but the trial just ended. So, well, at least they didn't even have a trial. They had a plea deal, and it's been a whole year.
Now
So
he's been under house arrest this time
yes,
as
and
well.
that's another thing. It's under house arrest. So I don't know if you can think about his position. I mean, I don't know how often the listeners might be in this type of position where they're taking a plea deal. I mean, imagine most people aren't in a position where they're going to do that. But if you can't leave your house legally, and you couldn't have you haven't been able to leave your house for a year, basically any type of deal that where you are able to leave your house is going to start sounding pretty good. That's kind of what I'm thinking, and that's one reason I wanted to bring this up on the show today.
No, that makes perfect sense, Darren.
Yeah, and so if you were really interested in justice, or even if you had an interest in the laws being followed, we really can't conclude anything from the fact that he took a plea deal. If you put somebody in an uncomfortable position long enough, they'll do things. And I don't think you really can say they're guilty of anything just because they wanted to maybe see a loved one or leave their house. I mean, something as simple as that. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this plea deal. I don't know if you had any other thoughts, JJ.
No, that's pretty much it. And I think you bring up a good point with the whole innocent until proven guilty thing. Innocent people aren't, put in jail or under house arrest.
Right, and I mean, even in extreme circumstances, you could see maybe extreme measures, but for a year, um, that's just crazy. I think so. Yep, Charlie took a plea deal, but what it really means, I don't know. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
So there was another story that I ran across this week, and it happened to do with Ecuador. Ecuador's in the news again. So Ecuador, we covered them maybe a month ago, where it was kind of a obscure article saying that Ecuador is going to start with a digital currency that's going to be their national digital currency, and they're going to get rid of their current currency, which is the U.S. dollar, or not be as dependent on it. And they also outlawed Bitcoin, so they're going to create a digital currency, but they outlawed a digital currency. So it was all in all, it was a very weird article, JJ. That's kind of was my impression
Yeah.
of it. And so coming across my desk again today, this was at fizz.org, but it's actually an AP article, so you can see it in different places. Is another article saying the same thing, that Ecuador's going to start a digital currency, and doesn't have too many details about like how it will work. But it just says this, and in fact, it's such a strange story, JJ, that I actually started to think it's not true. You know how you read things that's just kind of weird, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense because it's not true. But then I, one reason I'm bringing it up though is that when I got to the end of the article, it said it was by the Associated Press. And I'd be very surprised if the Associated Press didn't do fact checking to check this. So
You
it's
think maybe? Yeah. I mean, they had a somewhat similar story as you said a month ago. And is there any new information in this story
no,
that you can find?
there was just one quote that I liked. Let's see. It's far too early to know how the thinking of making the electronic money work, said analyst John Lorenzo of Credit Suisse LLC. So it's far too early to know how they are thinking of making the electronic money work. So they're going to make an electronic money. They outlawed an electronic money, but they don't know how they're going to make an electronic money work. So I don't know. Maybe they should hire me. I'll help them with some of the cryptography.
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost silly. They had this bold story about getting rid of, as you said, using the dollar. And I think maybe there was some backlash about that because if you look at history, when countries stop using the U.S. dollar, the United States government takes issue with that.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll keep an eye on what Ecuador is doing. I think not using Bitcoin itself is kind of silly, and creating their own currency is slightly silly, especially if they base it off of the SHA-256 algorithm for mining.
Yeah, but that's another thing about all these articles. I've gone through them. They say digital currency. Nowhere does it say cryptocurrency. So it doesn't necessarily even have to have a blockchain. It could have a centralized thing at the Central Bank of Ecuador. The Central Bank of Ecuador um, is directing how this will be made. So it definitely could be a centralized currency, which would be again or be different than all the cryptocurrencies that are out there right now. So
Well, and at the very bottom of the article, there's a quote here there's a preface. Let me just read this a little bit. Some question whether Ecuador's central bank is constitutionally empowered to create such a currency. Quote, let's remember that the central bank has no autonomy, and this could lend itself to all manner of political maneuvers, unquote, said independent political analyst Jamie Carrere. So, there could be some political shenanigans going on, and I guess we'll just have to see what pans out.
yeah,
And
anytime you get a hold of the currency, you definitely have a lot of political power. So, yep, that doesn't surprise me at all. That's probably some astute analysis. So, right there. So
well,
you did mention one thing about using Bitcoin in Ecuador, and there is something that's been on my mind a little bit. It made the post talking about. I'm still kind of worried about this the block size limit on Bitcoin. You remember how we talked about that like a year or two ago, JJ?
yeah, how the limit on the block size will basically throttle how many transactions can be processed per second.
Right. So right now there's about 7 transactions a second. So with all this discussion about using Bitcoin more widespread, I'm still kind of worried because I don't know if the network's ready to handle it. But there, I mean, I told our listeners last time that, or last show, that there's a discussion going on between Gavin Andreessen and Peter Todd about how what solution might be employed to get rid of that limit. And I think when that limit's lifted, then this mass adoption. I don't know if it'll happen immediately after, but I wouldn't cringe to think about mass adoption if the network could handle it. So
Fair enough.
yeah,
Yeah. My only concern, one final thing to think about, of course, and of course, many people have thought of this, is the size of the ledger, the size of the blockchain, when the size of the blocks becomes even larger and larger. As it is, for a new person to start up and download the entire blockchain, if they have a full node wallet, it's going to take quite a while and quite a bit of bandwidth.
yeah,
So
yeah. I did this with Armory, and Armory is actually pretty dang quick at getting the blockchain. I went from more or less nothing to blockchain in but to usable node in 9 hours about, which was amazing. But there's something that Armory does. It actually downloads what's called Bootstrap, a file named Bootstrap, which is like the beginning of the blockchain, like for the first 300,000 blocks or something, through BitTorrent. So it actually connects into the BitTorrent network, gets this huge file, and then it downloads the rest of the blocks normally from the normal client. So the Bitcoin Core, they call it now. So
yeah,
so there are some some, well, thanks to Armory, there's some quickness that's been added, and I had a better computer. I had an SSD drive. I don't know if that made any difference or not. Um, but there are some advantages that have been incorporated. But yeah, I still think it's an issue if we're going to have just regular people run their own nodes.
Definitely.
So
So our this is a big international basically show, but we have news coming out of India as well.
yeah, India. So there was an article that came out, and I put this on our Twitter feed. So that's our you might be listeners might be interested in our Twitter feed, so you can follow us at Neocash Radio. So India, the article from Reuters is that India is better prepared for eventual Fed rate hike, says the Reserve Bank of India chief. So so what this article's about is, well, in the U.S., interest rates have been so low for so long, and the thinking is basically there's only one direction they can go, and that's more or less up, right? If they're close to zero, I mean, but the 30 years at 3 something%, which is really low, and the 1 month is at like 0.1%, so it's really low interest rates, and so eventually the Fed will need to correct. And last show I talked about the discussion that they're having about raising rates. I mean, having at the U.S. Fed about raising interest rates or not raising interest rates. You may want to raise interest rates to stifle inflation. So I thought this was an interesting story because sometimes when you're just going around your own country and just living your life, you kind of forget what effect your country might have on another country. So what India's done, or the Central Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India, has basically taken steps to prepare for interest rates going up in the U.S. So that just means they basically have a plan. This article does claim that they have plenty of reserves, meaning maybe dollar reserves. They possibly could even have gold reserves. So that, as about 8 months ago, when we had an article about the Indian rupee losing a lot of its value, eventually it was their reserves that came in to save the day and save the rupee. So if they still got pretty strong reserves, that they certainly will have a method of dealing with any type of rate hike in the U.S. Do you have any thoughts on that, JJ?
Well, it's good on them to prepare because, like you said, the United States does have a massive effect on the rest of the world. So I mean, we'll see what happens if the Fed actually raises interest rates, or if it keeps this pretty much easy money flowing through the system. We'll see.
Right. Well, there'll be some easy pesos flowing through Argentina. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if you enjoy listening to Neocash Radio, please support our show. You can support our show by either donating at our support page, or you can go and get a free millibit. And some people have done this, and it does support our show and in very little ways. But you can get a millibit and help Neocash Radio. We have a blog post up about get a free millibit, so you might want to check that out. Also, we are affiliates of Amagi Metals, which recently we didn't cover the story, JJ, or I didn't get to it last time. But Amagi Metals recently has announced in 2016 they're going to stop accepting dollars. Do you hear about that?
Yes, I did. That's
Yeah.
a bold move.
That's a bold move, but of course it's a couple years out. So let's see what happens in 2016. But I mean, there is a lot more safety when you're accepting bitcoins for their service, for their metal that they sell. So that's really exciting news, and so it's nice to get it out there for any of the listeners. Do you have anything else you want to tell our listeners, JJ?
Not really. I was just going to ask you about the traditional markets.
Oh yes, the traditional markets. Well, gold, it's holding around 1287. It might have been 1280 last time I spoke. to you, the listeners. Silver's around 1950, still kind of low. Um, the hash rate's been going crazy on them, not necessarily traditional markets, but the hash rate has been going very high up there. It's been over 200 petahashes per second. Bitcoin price is around 480 last time I checked. Litecoin's hovering around 5. Doge is still in the doldrums with around 28 satoshis maybe. Uh, so that, and very low volume on top of that. So, but so that's what's happening. And then at the beginning of the show, we did talk about the stocks being at an all-time high. So there you go. That's the traditional markets, JJ.
Thanks a lot, Darren.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to Neocash Radio.